If it's easier, I can mute you.
You can mute me.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so just to remind everyone, we are in the middle of a series where we are gleaning insight and wisdom from the weekly Pirkei Avot, which is a section of the Mishnah known as the Ethics of Our Fathers. And it's 6 chapters, and it's something that we study every week on Shabbat afternoon. As we discussed when we began, we are in a period of self-refinement as we go from the festival of Passover to Shavuot, which is the giving of the Torah. It's a period of character refinement and looking into ourselves and trying to either correct or even not necessarily correct things that we feel are deficient, but just to try and uplift or elevate ourselves in specific areas that we may feel we'd like to do. This is an opportunity at this time of the year to do that. And Pirkei Avot speaks a lot about these kinds of things. And in contrast with the rest of the Mishnah, which deals more with technical laws and how to fulfill different obligations that we have as Jews, Pirkei Avot focuses more on a way of life beyond the technical and the specific, but more an elevated way of living or an inspired way of living, different types of guidance that we can glean from it. So this week, we're in chapter 3, and we've just, been choosing one Mishnah, or not even the entire Mishnah. Sometimes it's just part of a Mishnah to focus on and see how it can inform our perspectives and the way that we behave. So to introduce tonight's Mishnah, I'm just going to get our thoughts going a little bit. So I want to ask you, have you ever tried to do something? It could be anything, and you've worked really hard at it. You've put in so much effort. You've sweated at it. You've stayed up late, given up other things in order to be able to get it done, only to later realize that somebody else has done the same thing with a much better outcome than yours. If you've ever had an experience like this, how did that make you feel about yourself? How did that make you feel about your efforts to accomplish this specific endeavor or to devote time to this specific pursuit?
I don't think I actually had that same experience. However, I can imagine that it would make the person feel inferior, as though they're less, because they're seemingly less successful than the other person that put in the same effort. So it might mean that they're less intelligent, less successful, and ultimately it would definitely be detrimental to the sense of self-value, I imagine.
Right, exactly. And that obviously can have an impact with whether they would try again or how they would feel about pursuing something else that seems a bit daunting. So that would lead to my second question, which is even a step earlier. Have you ever considered pursuing something, but then you've looked around or you've remembered certain people that you know, and you've realized, I'm not going to be able to do as good a job as person X, so maybe I shouldn't bother? Has thinking about the abilities or accomplishments or successes of other people affected whether or not you have decided to pursue something, or whether you've decided not to pursue something because you feel like it may be a waste, or you wouldn't be able to do as good a job? So that's even earlier in the story. because you may not even start. You may not even start the process.
So, first of all, I think that in some ways everything's been done before. And, so personally, I run into that all the time. Like when I was an academic and, writing, there were a million authors who had done, what I had done, but I don't know. I think that it's a matter of who you're doing it for. Like if I was doing something to try and impact other people, or but somebody had already done it, then like I wouldn't need to be the one to do it. But if I'm doing something for myself, then I would then I would do it anyways.
Okay, that makes sense. Because for yourself, it hasn't been done before, so that would be an accomplishment. Whereas if it's been done in general, then that would be the only reason you'd be doing it, then you wouldn't necessarily feel like that it's something that you should be undertaking. Let's switch the perspective a bit. Have you ever been in a position where you have watched somebody else put an effort into something or try to accomplish something, and as you're observing or thinking about them doing that particular thing, you are wondering why they are even trying, because there are people out there who have so much more expertise. Perhaps you feel even that you yourself have more experience in that particular area or more knowledge, and you're wondering, why would this individual spend the effort when it can be done so much better by somebody else? So that's another, that's just the other side of the same coin, where we may have those thoughts about somebody else and not about ourselves. So this can affect us in different directions, I guess we'll say. So let's look at let's pull up the Mishnah that we're going to be studying this evening, and let's get the ball rolling on some of the insights into this discussion. I'm just going to share my screen over here. Okay, so we're in the second Mishnah. We're not going to do the entire thing. We're going to do the first section because there's actually two sages who are quoted in this Mishnah, and we're going to just read the quote from the first one. They're both called Rabbi Chanina, interestingly, but they're not the same person. So, Rabbi Chanina, deputy to the Kohanim, would say, "Pray for the integrity of the government. For were it not for the fear of its authority, a man would swallow his neighbor alive." Okay, this is probably not what you were expecting me to read. So let's just understand on a very basic level what is Rabbi Chanina trying to say over here. He's encouraging us that we should be praying for the integrity, or the word in the Hebrew used is bishloma, which is shalom, like the peace or the welfare of the government, that there should be a good and proper government. Because if we didn't have the fear of a government or some kind of structure like that, a man would swallow his neighbor alive. So what do you think, on a very basic level, before we try and bring this Mishnah to answer the questions we started with, on a basic level, what do you think this Mishnah is encouraging us to do? Or maybe I'll ask it differently. Why do you think it would be important to be concerned that to be concerned that there's a healthy and good, peaceful government?
It almost sounds to me like without the government, man people are just going to go berserk and kill each other. So it's almost as if there's no trust that human nature is going to be nice to each other. We need laws to protect us from each other.
Okay, so you sound like you don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, I never thought of it like that, but it's kind of sad if that's true. I mean, I think people are innately good, and yet I don't, I can't imagine myself ever eating my neighbor or killing my neighbor. But
Right.
there's also all kinds of examples of people going berserk all the time. So I don't know, but it's just interesting that we have to depend on our laws in order to be civil.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting. Go ahead, Luann.
So that it's very interesting to me because I'm reading Hobbes' Leviathan, and he's articulated all these laws of nature around man, and the first, essentially, the fundamental condition of man is in what he has outlined, and in this whole treatise he's outlining the necessity for government. This was written in like the 1500s. So he says that the natural state of man is that they're in a natural state of war because they have like differing hopes, and so they're always wanting what the other one has, and so they're in this natural state of war with one another. And that the second law is that is to seek peace. So he comes up with all these, he articulates all these natural laws that lead up to his reasoning for why there needs to be government. And this, one of the things he also talks about is that people have to form these commonwealths and and essentially like elect somebody or have an authority who they give their will to, whatever, and that they have to kind of fear that authority. Otherwise, that authority will not have any kind of influence and power over the people. So,
Right. That's very interesting. I mean, I think yes, obviously people do have an innate goodness, and most people do, but for society as a whole to feel safe and lawful and ethical, there does need to be some kind of structure of law and order to maintain a peaceful, functional, civil society. Because once a breakdown starts, then everyone has to fight for their survival. It was interesting. I heard somebody recently relate how they went to visit Russia a few years after communism had fallen. I don't remember which city they were staying in, but they were describing how it felt very unsafe to be walking around, late at night over there. And he was talking to somebody who he met, and who was a native who lived in Russia, and that individual said, a few years back when the communists were ruling, it was very safe to walk around at night because there was so much control and fear that there wasn't the law, while obviously the corruption and the type of government, etc., controlling and completely repressive, and we know all about that. So you would think that we don't want that kind of government. We do not want that kind of government. But at the same time, because there was an authority, there was safety. Whereas later on, with more freedom and the corruption after that was taking place, things broke down more, and it was less safe, to be outside. So it's just an interesting thing to consider. That, I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean that we can't hope that if we feel like there's a terrible government at the moment, or at different times in different places, there's things being done by the leadership that are incorrect, it doesn't mean we can't hope that it should change, or pray for a better leader, or depending on the time and place that we're in. That's fine. But what the message of the Mishnah is just that we should be interested in there being a healthy infrastructure of authority in order to uphold and maintain a civil, moral, and safe society. Because otherwise, as it says, ish et re'ehu chaim bila'o, a man would swallow his fellow. One person would try to dominate and be powerful over another person. So the obvious question that we can ask, based on the way that Pirkei Avot is presented to us, right? I described how Pirkei Avot is not talking about regular technical law, but it's talking about uplifted and elevated, inspired living. So this seems like a very strange message, because if people are already following the law and they're now ready to be taught about living an uplifted or inspired life, would you be preaching to them about not killing their neighbors and not swallowing up each other alive? I mean, it doesn't really seem to fit in with the agenda, or with the purpose for what Pirkei Avot is here for. So how do we understand this Mishnah on a deeper level, that it can actually be something that teaches and guides us in a more nuanced way, rather than just coming to tell us, you need to be civil, and you need to not steal and kill and hurt your fellow. So the answer to that comes from the specific wording of the Mishnah. Okay, I'm going to be technical just for a moment, and then we'll talk more about the ideas. Let me just share this again. Okay, so the term used at the end, the phrase used to be freezing a bit. I just want to check if you can hear me. You can still hear me, okay. I'm not seeing the screen clearly here. Okay, are we together? Okay, yeah, I think that's good. Sorry about that. Why does it use that more vague terminology, more of a metaphor, rather than stating explicitly, if there wouldn't be law and order, then one man would kill another, one man would steal from another? Why does it use something more metaphoric? So in there, we're going to find the explanation and the answer to how this particular teaching can give us a more nuanced and deeper perspective in the way that we treat people, and the way that we think about ourselves, and the role of each person in this world. So it says in Hasidic teaching that just like a person is supposed to be aware of their deficiencies and where they need to improve, it's also important for a person to know and recognize their strengths and their talents and their abilities, right? Because just like we have a responsibility to improve what is lacking, we also have a responsibility to fulfill the potential of the gifts that God has given us and the talents that we are able to use. So, having said this, it's very possible that a person can look at themselves and think, I'm quite knowledgeable, or very knowledgeable, or educated, or skilled, or experienced in this and this particular area. Whereas my friend, my neighbor, my coworker, my sister, they don't have as much experience, or they didn't train for this, or they never really invested time in this. So in this area, I'm the one who should be doing the contributing. I'm the one who should take center stage. If something needs to be done in this particular field, I'm the one who should take that role. And this other individual, they're better off sort of just trailing me in my shadow. Okay, maybe they can assist me, but they're not making any major significant contributions. So in this particular scenario, the second individual is getting, so to say, swallowed up in your aura or in your expertise and abilities. And you may be 100% correct. We're not talking about, delusional self-inflation. A person knows if they're capable of certain things or not. And it could be a completely correct conclusion. But when this happens, the Mishnah comes along and it tells us, when you feel this way, if you have this kind of attitude in a particular situation, what should you do? You should pray for the welfare of Malchut. Betty, would you like to say something?
Well, let's finish this.
Okay.
Come back. It's something that we already spoke about.
Okay, I'll be happy to get back.
Okay.
Okay, so just in a moment. Let's pray for the welfare of Malchut. Okay, what does Malchut mean? Malchut means the rulership. Now, obviously, on a basic level, it's talking about the earthly rulership, whoever's in power or ruling at the time. But on a deeper level, it says in the Talmud that the kingdom of earth is similar to the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? It means that the rulership that's taking place down here, the power to rule, the ability to rule, it evolves and is an outgrowth of the fact that there is power, spiritual rulership and spiritual power. And obviously at the root of it all is the ultimate power, the King of all kings, which is God. So the Mishnah is saying to us, if we feel like we should be taking center stage and dominating in a particular area because of our abilities and skills, and person B and C don't really have anything to do or contribute in this area, when this is happening to us, we should stop and pray, meaning to say, put ourselves in the mindset and recognize and remember whose rulership and kingship we are all under, which is that obviously ultimately of God. Because once we have God in the picture, once we recognize him as the all-powerful ultimate being, then our sense of higher and lower and greater and lesser changes completely. It's thinking about God in comparison to ourselves is a very great equalizer, because in comparison or relative to God, me and this person are basically the same. Yes, I may have certain talents and abilities in this area that are greater, but suddenly when you put that in the shadow of greatness that's so beyond, we become the same. There's an anecdote about a student of the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. He had a student who himself was a great teacher, a genius, and his name was Rabbi Zalman Zezmer. He was so well known for his intellectual abilities. He had tremendous understanding and capabilities in that area. And there was a student of he had a student. Okay, so Rabbi Zalman had a student whose name was Rabbi Hillel of Parich. Now, this Hillel of Parich was described by his Rebbe, not the teacher, Rabbi Zalman, but by a different Rebbe. He was described as a half a Rebbe, okay? So just to give you an idea of what a great person Rabbi Hillel was. Now, what did Rabbi Hillel say about Reb Zalman, his teacher? He said, compared to Reb Zalman's mind, the cat and I are the same. So he was trying to give this idea, an explanation for how great the capacity of Reb Zalman's mind was, that in comparison to those intellectual capabilities, the abilities of himself, Reb Hillel, and a cat, which obviously doesn't really have intellectual capabilities of a human mind, are exactly the same. So it depends on the context that you're putting yourself in. So when we widen that context and we put ourselves in the background and in the context of God, then suddenly our feelings of being greater than or more dominant diminish. Betty, let's get back to you. What did you want to say? If you're speaking, you'll need to unmute yourself because we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. I'm not sure if you're speaking or not. I'm going to ask you to unmute. You should have a dialog box that pops up. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not working for some reason. We'll try again soon. If you figure it out, then we'll take you whenever you can come on. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so when we focus in this kind of direction, we also need to additionally remember and recognize God being the ruler, God being the creator. He created each and every one of us. And that means that we each have something specific and individual that we can, and not only can, but must contribute. So yes, I may be very capable and have specific gifts and talents. But the other people around me also have their specific contributions that they need to make, which are valuable and needed, which I'm not able to make. So it's not only about me pushing myself ahead in order to get the job done, but we're here doing this all collectively, each of us in our own Are you hearing me? Sorry.
Just froze.
Okay. Are we back?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. So let me just backtrack a minute to make sure you didn't miss something. Okay. So we therefore all have a contribution to make, and what the person next to me and my neighbor and coworker are doing are also very important, and I should be interested and invested in that success as well, and not only focused on how much I'm able to accomplish due to my talents and abilities. And this obviously allows us to make room for another person, and not only make room for them, but even to be encouraging and lend help where we feel we may be able to help in order that they can maximize their contribution as well. Now, to go to the opposite direction, if there's a particular area, something that we feel that we must be doing or that we would like to do, but we feel inadequate, or we look around and we see other people who are much more successful at it, And for some of us, this might be in one area. For some of us, this could be in many areas. It could also be there's this one particular person in your life who you feel almost effortlessly is able to achieve and succeed at so many different things, whereas you have to put in so much effort in order to be able to achieve at least as much, or maybe not even as much. And those kind of situations can make us feel like, well, maybe what I'm doing is unnecessary, and why should I bother? I'm not really accomplishing anything, and I'm not really making a difference. But again, to apply the same train of thought, the same thought process, turning to God and recognizing that He has created me, He has created you, He's created each and every one of us. We each have a specific potential that we can't neglect. We have to pursue it, we have to focus on it. And while these feelings may be normal, natural, and it's not necessarily something we're going to overcome in one day, we can keep trying to come back to that and pray to God for the strength to overcome these feelings and not let them get in the way. And then we can focus more on accomplishing what we feel we have to do. So now I think we can understand a lot better how this Mishnah is not a basic guidance and teaching for just be moral, be civil, be ethical, don't hurt your friend. But it's something much deeper than that, something much more nuanced than that. And it affects the way that we think of ourselves and whether we think we should be investing in something and pushing ourselves to accomplish. And also affects the way we look at other people, whether we value what they're doing and encourage and promote, or whether we think that it's not worthwhile and it's not necessary and they don't need the space to do that sort of thing. On the heels of that, I'm going to show you a very short video which will speak about this message, and then it will kind of turn it in a little bit of a different direction as well. And we'll talk about it after we've watched it.
Diversity is the one true thing we all have in common. The old saying goes.
Sorry, I think something just went wrong there. Let me redo that. Okay, let me try again.
Diversity is the one true thing we all have in common. The old saying goes. What a fundamental truth in Judaism. Every soul has its unique, individual, and indispensable mission in this world. You have a contribution to make that was never made before you and will never be made after you. Each one of us is an indispensable note in the cosmic divine symphony. You must bring your light and your music into the world. But here's the question. How do I figure out what my mission is? How do I discover what is my unique contribution? One answer is contained in two words in the book of Psalms. King David says, "May oivai techakmeini," literally, make me wiser than my enemies. But there's a much deeper and personal interpretation. May oivai techakmeini, from my enemies, I can gain much wisdom. What does this mean? It means I could learn so much from those things or people in life who frustrate me, angry, who annoy me, those things that scare the living daylights out of me, those people or things or experiences that frighten me. Instead of running away from them, they are here to teach me so much about who I am, what my work consists of, and what my unique mission is. You see, those things that your soul needs to accomplish in this world encounter tremendous resistance. So when I'm experiencing this type of fear and frustration, I or you should never run away from it. Very often, here lay the unique opportunities, gems of insight that allow me to figure out who I am and what is my unique light to bring to the world. Fear not your enemies. Gain wisdom from them.
So, as he spoke in the beginning about how we each have our own individual, specific, unique contribution. And then, of course, the big question of how do we figure out what that is? And the beautiful, obviously, this is only one answer. This is one way, the beautiful answer that he offered based on the words of the Psalms, when we think about challenges or obstacles, so those can be obstacles from outside of us. I think we often tend to first think of those challenges, things in our circumstances that are not necessarily in our control, that make it difficult for us to do something, that bring that resistance, as Rabbi Jacobson described in the video. But relating more to the Mishnah that we are describing, there's also the concept of obstacles from within us. When we have different feelings or perceptions about ourselves that make us feel inhibited and hold us back from feeling the courage to go ahead and pursue this particular endeavor or go after that particular accomplishment. Those are also they're different, but they're also very real obstacles and bring a great amount, sometimes even greater resistance. Because when there's an obstacle outside of ourselves, somehow we might be able to say more easily, I'm not going to let this get in my way. This is going to make me stronger. I'm going to overpower it. But when there's an obstacle within us that comes from a belief about ourselves that we've created, so we've convinced ourselves to think of ourselves in a certain way, and then we believe that that's the truth. And we don't necessarily think about challenging it. So when these feelings may come our way, if we can remember this kind of thought, it can help us, instead of being convinced that, yes, I'm never going to do as good a job, or I'm never going to accomplish as much, or I'm going to have to work much too hard to achieve half of what she can. We can challenge that, and we can say, maybe the reason I'm feeling this is because really I have a much deeper strength within me, and I have to just overlook this and overcome this and realize that I'm actually capable of a lot more than I think. Because there has never been a person with your personality and your abilities in the unique combination that you have them. And not somebody like you who lives in the specific environment with a specific influence that you have. And when you, and each and every one of us realizes that and recognizes how meaningful and valuable our specific contribution is, I think that helps empower us to be determined that even if it may be difficult, we can and we must go ahead and focus on contributing whatever we can and strengthening ourselves as we know that we can do more, then we tend to think that we can. So this is the message of this section of the Mishnah. And I think it gives us some tools and some perspectives to help us overcome different situations that many of us encounter, whether it's in the direction of feeling that another person may not be so contributing so much, or whether it's in the direction of us pushing ourselves to contribute more. It could be different in different areas of our lives for each of us. I hope that this gives you something to think about and is helpful for you in some kind of way.